Today I will be ranking the last 10 NFL MVPs. Okay, so obviously the first one we have is Aaron Rodgers in 2015, or 2014, excuse me. I mean, he had 4,300 yards, 38 touchdowns. JJ Watt finished second. He had 20 sacks. He had 3 touchdowns too, bro. I'm not gonna lie, man. I think this one's questionable. I think it's questionable. Just because his stats really weren't that crazy. Like, that's good. Don't get me wrong. 38 tutties, 5 picks, whatever. But when you compare that to JJ Watt's 20 sacks, 3 touchdowns, I mean, I don't know if it's well-deserved. I think it's questionable. Whereas Cam Newton, well-deserved. Very well deserved for Cam Newton. I mean, 2015, a crazy season. It was well deserved. I mean, the Panthers went like 15-1 that season, so he obviously deserved it. I mean, he just set the NFL world on fire that year. Next up is Matt Ryan in 2016. I mean, it was between Matt Ryan and Tom Brady that year. And the Falcons, obviously, they made it to the Super Bowl. So did the Patriots, and we know what happened there. But I mean, in 2016, Matt Ryan had almost 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns, 7 picks. I mean, compared to Tom Brady's 3,500, 28 tutties, 2 picks. I mean, yeah. I think Matt Ryan's was well-deserved. Like, let's just call it there. Very, very well-deserved. Led the Falcons to almost their first ever playoff, or almost first ever Super Bowl win. Notice how I said almost. And the following year is Tom Brady in 2017, and I'm gonna put this in undeserved. You wanna know why I'm gonna put this in undeserved? Because in 2017, the Eagles finished 13-3, and they were 13-0 at one point? I believe they were 13-0 at one point, and then their franchise quarterback tore his ACL. So Tom Brady had 32 tutties, 8 interceptions, 4,500 yards. That's cool, right? Carson Wentz had 33 touchdowns, 7 picks in only 13 games. He was a different animal, man. He was on another planet. He was balling. Carson Wentz would have easily won MVP that year if he didn't get hurt, which is honestly kind of ironic because he got hurt, missed the rest of the year. Nick Foles came in and they still won the Super Bowl, but that's besides the point, man. Obviously, they were a good team, but Carson Wentz definitely deserved MVP that year. So I'm going to put Tom Brady in undeserved. And next up is Patty Mahomes' first ever MVP back in 2018, his first season starting as well. And I want to put it in well-deserved, but the bias in me, man, I want to put it in questionable because he robbed my boy Drew. Drew really deserved it that season, man. He really did. I'll put it in well-deserved, though. I don't want to look like a hater. Honestly, I'll put it in historic seasons just because we've never seen a year one starter do that. I don't think we've ever seen a year one starter win MVP like that. Like, that was crazy. He just came out of nowhere. That was one of his best seasons ever. Actually, that was his best season ever. That was peak Mahomes right there. 5,000 yards, 50 tutties, 12 picks. That was peak Mahomes. That was peak Patrick Mahomes. I mean, as much as I want to discredit it, yeah, I mean, Drew Brees, he can't compete with that, bro. He can't compete with that. That's definitely That's definitely Mahomes' award. Honestly, I might put it in best seasons ever because that was... I'm putting in best seasons ever. I'm going to glaze because that was an insane season. Next up is Lamar's first MVP, and I'm going to put it in well-deserved. It was a pretty solid season. It definitely wasn't his best MVP season. He's had better MVP seasons. Future foreshadowing. So in 2019, he had 3,100 passing yards with 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and he also had 1,200 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna put it in historic. That's an historic MVP season. To have 3,600 passing yards, 36 passing touchdowns, and then on top of that, have 1,200 rushing yards. That was unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. So I'm going to put that in historic for sure. And next up is the first of Aaron Rodgers back-to-back MVPs. I'm going to put this in a well-deserved. I believe he had 48 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. If I remember reading, yeah, 48 tutties, dude. 4,300 passing yards. That's definitely well-deserved. Definitely well-deserved. And his following season, he'd also win MVP, 37 touchdowns, 4 picks. Would take a bit of a, don't want to say regression, but he did not outperform his 2020 season. So I'm just going to put that one right there and well-deserved. And honestly, we honestly could have gave Joey B the MVP that year. 34 touchdowns, 14 picks, 4,600 yards. That would have been fun to do because that was the year they went to the Super Bowl. Definitely could have done that. You know what? I'll bump this one down to questionable. So now Aaron Rodgers has 2 questionable MVPs. No comment. Next up is Mahomes' second MVP in the 2022 NFL season. And I'm going to stick that in well-deserved. I mean, 41 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 5,200 passing yards. I mean, yeah, we're gonna stick that in well-deserved. That is a well-deserved MVP. Next up is the first of Lamar's possible back-to-back MVPs. I'm just making this list. You know, I believe he'll win MVP this year, so I've got him as this year's MVP winner as well. And last year, Lamar only had 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Definitely not as good as his first MVP season. And he only had 5 rushing touchdowns, and only 800 rushing yards. This was a way worse MVP season than his first MVP season. So honestly, I'm going to put it in undeserved because I feel like last year could have been the year we gave it to a running back. We gave it to a different position other than quarterback. We could have gave it to CMC. I mean, it could have happened, man. 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns, 500 receiving yards. I mean, his stats really aren't like I mean, they're good, but I just think that could have been the year. I just feel like his play elevated the 49ers just way higher. I mean, we obviously saw the impact that he has on them this year because obviously they didn't make the playoffs without him. I just think that could have been the MVP season that a running back finally gets it. A running back finally gets the MVP. That was it last year. Maybe it could have been this year. Maybe Saquon could have won it this year. I mean, many say that Saquon deserves MVP this year. Maybe Joe Burrow, but Lamar Jackson looks like he'll be taking it home this year. I mean, he had 41 touchdowns, 4 picks, 4,100 yards, passing yards, that is. 900 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. I mean, one could argue that's better than his 2019 season. I mean, he had more total touchdowns. He had less interceptions, had more total yards. So I think you could stick this one in historical seasons as well. I mean, I do think you could possibly give this MVP to Joe Burrow. I think it could happen, but just because they didn't make the playoffs, you know, it is what it is. Joey B's not gonna be able to get MVP, but I think you could give Lamar a historic seasons category for this past season. I mean, I think his first MVP is just a little bit more impressive just because he did it in his first year starting, just like Mahomes did. But I mean, at the end of the day, dude, he had better stats than that season. So, you know, I think it's another historic season for Lamar. I mean, he's a mobile quarterback. We've never seen a quarterback like him. Like, we've seen Michael Vick, but we've never seen Michael Vick dominate the way Lamar Jackson has. Now, the only thing Lamar Jackson that we're waiting on is for him to dominate in the playoffs, which he had a good playoff game this past year, but Lamar needs to get a Super Bowl under his belt, and then I think he'll be a top 5 quarterback of all time. But once he starts getting team success, I think that's where we're gonna see Lamar Jackson really get up there in all-time conversations. But if you boys want to see another tier list, then click right here. Let me know if you boys want to see more of them. Check it out right here. I rank all the Madden covers.